40 years back in November 1984, 4,000 Sikhs were killed in Delhi, the capital of India. The genocide continued unabated for 3 days. Every minute, one Sikh was killed on the streets of Delhi. After the genocide, the guilty were given high positions and they were given the position of power. For 40 years, the victims are still waiting for justice. The cases for the justice to the victims are still continuing even now. I, H.S. Fulka, a senior advocate, has been handling these cases right from November 1984 onwards. Through this video series, we have made an effort to bring to you how this massacre was planned. It's an effort to take you through the whole entire journey of this 14 years.
It is my pleasure to welcome Justice Ravindra Bhat, former judge in the Supreme Court of India, who as a lawyer was also involved in proceedings before the Misra Commission. Thank you so much, Justice Bhat, for joining us today.
You're welcome.
I wanted to begin by asking about your recollections from that time in 84 itself, when the violence against Sikh communities broke out.
My earliest recollection, Nitika, is that those days I was a very young lawyer, freshly minted, you can say, because I had just 2 years at the bar and for the most time I used to travel by bus. So I was going to the Supreme Court and there was a huge, I think there was a traffic diversion because at Ames there was a block, and that was when one was told that Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister, had been shot, and the news was very garbled. We didn't get to hear anything. Finally, after lunch session, we became aware that she passed. I mean, that's my recollection. Maybe the announcement came few years here or there, a few hours here or there. The next very vivid impression is I was returning back to my home, and again traveling by bus, and somewhere near Johor Bagh our bus stopped at the traffic signal, and as did other vehicles, and one among those vehicles was a scooter driven by a Sikh, slightly middle-aged Sikh, who was a bit bulky. The moment it stopped, a lot of people from my bus and the other vehicles started shouting, these are traitors, in Hindi, ye gaddar hain. These are the people who killed Indira Gandhi, and people just descended from the bus. And even I remember even somebody else parking a scooter, and this man realized, he stopped the scooter and just ran for life, and it was quite pathetic. He was not able to run, and soon the pursuers caught up with him, and he was soundly thrashed. So it wasn't that I actually witnessed a killing, but he was very soundly thrashed, and probably people started going away, and then I think my bus moved on. I was quite disturbed, but I didn't realize what we are in for, because the news came out and the news cycles kept carrying that in Doordarshan. We had that was the only channel. The next morning we got news of attacks on Sikh households, people gathering in large numbers and attacking Sikh households, Sikhs, localities where there was a big concentration of Sikhs, and by 11:30 I got a knock in my house, and there was this she is now very well known. Nandita Haksar, a friend of mine who used to practice those days in the Supreme Court, she came and told me, look, a lot of disturbance is going on and people are getting the worst of it, let's go. So udhar chalte hain. There was a Guru Harkrishan public school in Vatsant Vihar. I used to live in Munirka Enclave, just across the road. So I just went with her and a few others, and there we saw the scene. It was quite horrific because although there was no killing, but a mob had gathered from the surrounding areas, attacked the entire colony, the teachers and staff members of Guru Harkrishan Public School, put it on fire and stuff like that. So when I went there, some houses were completely gutted, rather flats or whatever, quarters were gutted, and many people had lost all their belongings. And I came across a teacher, a lady, a widow, and she hadn't lost her husband due to that, but she was already widowed, and her 2 young sons. So we all decided to give shelter to somebody or the other. So I took them in, and as did Nandita, she also took a family or 2, and some people in the colony, because not everyone was forthcoming. So this family lived with us. I was living with my parents, so they lived with us for 10 days. And I remember these were grown up, almost grown up, 16 and 14-year-old boys, quite sturdy and healthy. At some stage we decided that it's not safe for them to wear their hair long, so I cut their hair, and it was quite bad. The women felt bad and mother felt bad, and of course the boys were young and they were game. Then the same day or maybe the next day, this news of violence kept, it was being carried, and one heard of it from people known. So I was told that there are relief camps. So for a couple of days I used to go to the relief camps, and I was a lawyer in the High Court, so at that time there was some kind of PIL going on about these relief camps, the medication needed, food packets which were needed, and how the logistics of it, many people were getting together and doing it. So I was involved in that, and then when the PIL started, I used to go to the court also. So a great series of directions were issued by the bench. Justice Sachar was heading the bench. He, later after retirement, he headed the PUCL also. So that he showed a lot of sensitivity, and within 5-6 days, by the next week, the bench had changed, in the sense that Justice Sachar continued to head the bench, but there was a slightly more conservative judge, shall we say, who was not amenable or friendly to passing orders, and his point of view was, let things be as they are, we are not to intervene in this. Again, not attributing any motive or ill will or anything. So and then I saw certain things. There was a lot of polarization in the society that one moved. Even in my neighborhood, people used to come and threaten me and my brother that you are giving shelter to these people. It's not good. You will be targeted. And I remember once when we heard that some mob had again assembled to go to one of the Sikh concentrations where people were there, where people were living. There was a very senior ranking officer in our colony, a brigadier. His wife used to live there, so he had come down, and he was himself a Sikh. So we went and very passionately requested him that, do nothing, don't deploy anyone, just allow us to take some, people in uniform, 3-4 of them, and I think that, that's what we need. But he just heard us and didn't do anything. So this kind of, stony silence was a common feature And on the other hand, a lot of people were very aggressive about the community. Maybe it was the common sentiment then. Something had caught hold of people. And like in the Northeast, when I had seen in the Northeast too, much later, how sometimes things play out. So here too, I noticed for the first time that the government had imposed a curfew after certain hours. Now there were times when I would be in violation of the curfew. I would be returning late because the buses were not available, or I would be working, etc. Now nobody would stop me. The policemen wouldn't stop me. But if even by mistake a young Sikh boy would come, not only would he be stopped, he would be marched down to the police station and searched and so on. So this kind of discrimination one encountered at least during those heightened days. That is one. And on the other hand, I saw amongst the people I knew a deep sense of hurt, the Sikh community. And a third thing which we also felt, that many neighborhoods also rose to the occasion, and they really cared for their Sikh neighbors. They came out and gave them shelter, and it was all pulled out all stops. So we saw all these three things, and a few weeks later, not few weeks later, when the government, Rajiv Gandhi government came in, the government announced the formation of the Misra Commission. Fulka, Mr. Surabji, I think we had, I think initially retired Chief Justice Sikri was there, and of course Justice Sachar was still on the bench, so he was not part of it. And one Mr. Malik, Mr. Tarkunde, all these people joined together, and what was known as the Citizens Justice Committee was formed. So I was there in their meetings, and then after the Misra Commission got going, they set up a legal team in which me, Fulka, and Mr. Malik, and there was one more Sikh lawyer, Mangat. He also used to be, we used to go every day and work on these matters, and then represent the victims in the commission.
Could you describe the experience of participating in the commission proceedings and collecting these affidavits?
You see, that is the first kind of experience that I had with a commission or even a tribunal, and essentially my practice was in the High Court and the Supreme Court, so I had no trial experience. So as an experience, it was the first time, as I said, and it was both. I did the work of a paralegal as well as a lawyer. More as a paralegal, let's say, because we would all fan out to different neighborhoods. I remember going mostly to Trilokpuri and going to Sikh households and talking to people, drawing them out, and whether trying to ascertain whether they were comfortable giving affidavits, and then in the next or third round, second or third round, go and actually record what they said. Not record as in, have a tape recorder or anything like that, but just generally make the points and then request them to come down somewhere and then, take their depositions, and so the affidavits would be sworn and given. So I think from Trilokpuri itself we had around 30 or 40 affidavits, if I remember right. And it was those days it was a very underdeveloped colony, in the sense that there was no sewage, and some of these places had been gutted, and the tales of widows who had seen their children, their husbands being slaughtered, those were really pathetic. And as a young person, for quite some time, I used to be haunted by this at times. So and some of them were so, it was pitiable to see the kind of hopes that were generated because of this commission, because they all sincerely believed that they would get justice, in the sense that the culprits would be nabbed and they would also get some kind of reparations. So I remember a mother giving me a photograph of her dead son, who was subjected to violence. It was with me for the longest time. Some of the affidavits too were with me for the longest time. But in these 40 years, I think I've changed homes, I've changed my place at least 10 or 12 times. So in that whole process, I seem to have, misplaced them. But these are my very vivid memories.
Are there any aspects of the violence that came to light for the first time as you were collecting these affidavits, or any other aspects that stand out to you in particular from your visits to Trilokpuri?
See, in all, one generally saw some patterns. We saw, I think in all, there were some 300 odd affidavits which were filed with the Misra Commission. Whatever violence took place on 31st, the day of the assassination, appears to have been sporadic, spurred by, spontaneous anger and stuff like that, and something like that. But what took place after, say, 10 or 11, in the morning of 1st and thereafter the next couple of days, was not sporadic. It was incited and mostly organized. That's one. Two, somehow those who organized it had a sense of which homes to target. So it was not generally Sikhs or a cluster of people living together, but it later came out, I don't know whether it was in the commission or in the subsequent Nanavati commission, or some writing that, apparently the Sikh Gurdwara committee voter list was with the organizers, and the complicity of the then ruling party and the government was very much suspected, if not the party or the establishment entirely, but certainly some prominent elements and local leaders. So one theory was that perhaps before Operation Blue Star in when was that? May or June 1984, the intelligence gathering agencies had got hold of some of these lists, and that was with the government, and that fell into the hands of these organizers. Well, I can't comment on that because these are only reports. But certainly what appears to have happened, and that's what most victims who witnessed all this said, was that people would pointedly target Sikh households and drag out male members, and thereafter, subject them to all kinds of torture. Many of the witnesses talked about some white powder, maybe explosive or inflammable, being thrown, and people or tires being, victims being garlanded with tires, and the tires being set on fire. These were the patterns, and I think as to the leadership, definitely many witnesses deposed who went there, who they thought were behind it, etc. But at that point of time, I don't remember some of the political leaders being summoned, or maybe it was an issue of you can't write a report, we have not summoned them, and the commission also behaved in a very strange fashion after a point, because despite the CJC's application, the chairperson chose it fit not to summon anyone but hold a unilateral meeting or depose them in camera. Apart from the affidavits which were filed, on behalf, I mean, the victims' affidavits, there was a set of counter affidavits, in the sense that affidavits of parties who were supported by another spontaneously formed group called, I think, Nagarik Ekta or Suraksha Samiti or something like that, which tried to say that there was now no organized violence, and this is all a theory and there's no basis for this, and in fact the leadership and people, local people, were very supportive of and sympathetic to Sikhs and all that. Now a large number of such affidavits were filed. Now one didn't know how to handle them, and then once the cross-examination of these victims was completed, I don't think all the 300 were cross-examined, because my recollection is that some it was decided that some representative, samples from different localities would be taken up and the witnesses would be cross-examined. But the interesting part was these Nagarik Suraksha affidavits. They proved to be fictitious people, because when summons went to them, nobody turned up. Nobody means absolutely zero. So I later learned that someone, I now don't remember who it was, or set of people went to a stenographer, or rather a typist, a freelance typist, who used to sit in the Delhi High Court pool, and gave him and said that this is the material you have to type. And then he freely admitted to all of us that this is what happened. And then I churned out these affidavits because they asked me to, and apparently someone in the legal community. So I don't know whether this part has been covered somewhere, but it was quite hilarious that not one of those affidavits, not one of those deponents turned up before the commission. It was interesting for me because it's a first time experience, and it was my, let's say, some kind of a trial by fire into this kind of litigation, but the memories remained indelible, and I got involved with a lot of human rights, litigation after that. Probably this is the one experience that sensitized me, and in that sense it will remain with me forever.
In the immediate aftermath of the violence in 84, what were the civil society organizations besides CJC, which was formed later, that were mostly present in relief camps and other such activities?
See, I think there's one, PUCL had been set up, so was PUDR. PUDR and PUCL got together and they conducted a very detailed analysis and investigation and came out with a report which was very objective and was commended at that time by many people. So I think that as a matter of record, documentary, something documented in a very scientific and systematic manner, the PUCL PUDR report is very, let's say, was very timely and will always remain. And people can look into that, researchers and people like you who would revisit what happened. It's a great treasure trove for researchers.
And in the relief camps?
Well, I don't have too much recollection of the relief camps, except that I was running to and fro. But there were a lot of people, and it was November, it had turned cold. So, and we were concerned that, the people shouldn't fall sick, they should have enough food, and there should be some steady supply of medication and things like essentials like that.
And as a final question, sir, based on your experience with the Misra Commission, are there any larger reflections you could offer on the ways in which the legal system perhaps needs to change to accommodate for accountability and justice in the aftermath of mass violence?
Before I answer that, I must also tell you that the Misra Commission held sittings in Kanpur and Bokaro. So I remember having gone to Kanpur. I and Fulka, I think, initially went there. We again, Fulka used to go regularly to Kanpur, and at some stage it was decided that I would be going to Bokaro. So even in Bokaro, the number of casualties were less, but there was again extensive damage to properties. People were injured, and there was a lot of trauma. One thing, it's an aside, but it's connected with it. It so happened that most of the lawyers who represented the victims in the commission anywhere were Sikhs. More than 90% were Sikhs. So in Delhi, it was mostly me and Mr. Malik, the senior counsel, who actually led the team, who were not Sikhs. And in Bokaro, I used to go and coordinate the effort. So the they were fairly senior counsel, and they represented the CJC, carrying on the cross-examination and the final hearing and so on. So even in that space, there was some kind of a divide, because on the one hand I was getting a lot of support from my own senior. I used to work with Mr. Ranganath, so I told him that I am involved in this and I won't be able to work regularly. So you'll have to excuse me. What should I do? He said, no, you continue your work. If and when I need you, I will tell you, and if you can come, you rejoin, and otherwise you are still with my office and I'm just giving you leave, you go. Around the same time, since I was with him, I used to brief Mr. K.K. Venugopal for the longest time. I mean, he was his junior and he used to be associated with him. So every second day I used to brief Mr. Venugopal. So Mr. Venugopal had at some stage later, somewhere in end of 84 or early 85, he called me and said that this was not that the commission had not yet started. So he said that, or maybe it had started preliminary hearings and I had committed to it. So he asked me that I want you to join my office as my junior. So I told him that, sir, I have this constraint. So he said, no, Ravindra, there's no problem. You go ahead. That's more important. Once you finish with that, you come. And that offer was there. Of course, for other reasons, I later decided not to go. Even in the legal community, there was largely a lot of support for the victims. There was quite a lot of support. At the same time, I discovered something negative, because one day I was just walking down from the High Court or going into the court, I don't exactly remember, and I ran into a prominent lawyer, and then he took me aside and said, "Arey, Ravinder, tere ko kya ho gaya?" I mean, he referred to the Sikhs and said, "वो सरदारों के साथ उनका केस क्यों कर रहे हो? तुम अकेले मोना हो, मोना मीन्स हिंदू, तुम अकेले मोना हो, उनके साथ क्या कर रहे हो? तो उसको छोड़ दो, मैं तो तुमको." He was hinting that you leave that, I'll set you up properly. Of course, I was incensed, and I told Fulka, and we reported that to the chairperson. Nothing ultimately came out of it, because I didn't want to pursue the matter further, because I felt that I have made my point, there is no. And then he started getting anxious and sent feelers to me through his junior that, I hope you don't hold a press conference and all that. I said that was not my intention to bring you down or anything like that. And that was not the culture one was in those days. But I felt very let down that, we are supposed to be counsel, taking up cases, whatever is the case, as long as someone needs representation, you have to be there. So that, that was a very unique kind of experience that I underwent. And even in Bokaro, there was a pattern, but it was organized to some extent, but not to the extent that one saw the kind of preparation and logistical, support which the attackers got in Delhi. And I don't know, I have not followed up what happened in Bokaro, in the other commissions, whether anyone was indicted. Pursuant to the Misra and the Nanavati commission, and thereafter the other committees which were formed, some prominent people were indicted. I think ultimately, perhaps there was one policeman who got convicted, I don't remember. Some people got convicted. But the idea of justice, that has largely eluded society. Coming back to your larger question about what do you think, I don't know, people talk, and these days there's a lot of talk about truth and reconciliation, and how such things can heal people, and also you get the victim, the perpetrator to come to terms and kind of ask for atonement in some manner. I am not very confident. I mean, I have not read too much about those mechanisms, and it appears to have worked in South Africa. I don't know of any other society where it has been, implemented or practiced. I believe that, it is important for the state to take the swiftest possible action when any such incident takes place. And that's where we have to strengthen the impartiality of our bureaucracy, impartiality of our paramilitary and police forces. I believe that is most important, because the most what does the citizen believe when we look at the rule of law? The rule of law translates to something very simple, that if you are attacked or if someone robs you, the state is there for you and brings to book the perpetrator. Now, if the state doesn't do it and drags its feet, obviously a lot of things will happen. The trail will go cold, evidence will vanish, people will cover their tracks, and the perpetrators will roam free, gloating over the victims. So I believe that whatever else we might do, it is important for the state to act swiftly and ensure that its law enforcement mechanisms and agencies pick up the proper, firstly have a proper impartial, objective, investigation, collect all the materials and put those who are prominently involved, the masterminds behind this, to trial, and pursue that relentlessly. I think that's the one message which people would really appreciate and understand. Then, of course, there should be a proper mechanism to address how to deal with victims, and what kind of rehabilitation you must make. I mean, rehabilitative mechanisms that you create for them. Maybe these are victims of. There could be different kinds of victims. This is an obvious victims of violence, victims of rioting, and victims of some kind of communal flare-up. But then we also have other kinds of victims, like for instance what is happening in these days very commonly, disasters. So we must have a victim handling, if I may use that word, policy, which is used in a non-discriminatory manner in all situations. One is, it's not enough just to give compensation. but some people would lose their everything, their houses, their near and dear ones, most importantly their livelihoods. So how to deal with them? What are we to do with them? I believe justice is not only just ensuring that somebody is put to trial and sent to jail. Justice is also that you restore. The restorative part is equally important.
And so one final clarificatory question. Why were Kanpur and Bokaro chosen as the two other sites besides Delhi for the Misra Commission?
I think there were 3 or 4 cities apart from Delhi. Kanpur, Bokaro, perhaps some casualties in Jabalpur, and I remember even in Coimbatore there were. But I think it was the sheer logistics of the... No, I think the commission decided, looking at the overall picture about the number of deaths and the number of... perhaps there was a demand from the community also. So looking at that, I think it decided to hold inquiries into this.
And did you collect affidavits in Bokaro as well, sir?
Yes. I remember having gone there on at least 4 or 5 occasions, interacted with victims, and recorded their affidavits, and then gone during the hearing too.
And how were the hearings in Bokaro?
The hearings were normal up to the point of time when the CJC felt that things were normal, things were okay. At one point of time, after the secret or let's say in camera interaction by the chairperson with the highest officials, maybe police commissioner, I don't remember who else, the CJC decided that in principle we would not participate, and we withdrew from the proceedings. So once we withdrew from the proceedings in Delhi, I think we followed suit in other places as well.
Thank you so much, sir, for being so generous with your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, sir.